Welcome to Catalyze. I'm your host, Sarah O'Carroll. I have with me Andrew Patterson, the VP of Partnerships and Strategy at Greenfly. Andrew is also the former Senior Director of New Media at Major League Baseball. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you work at Greenfly, a software platform that helps organizations build their communities through brand advocacy. And one of the main sectors that Greenfly focuses on is the sports industry. So share with us how the platform works and how teams use the technology to get the action from the field to the fans.
At its core, Greenfly is a technology company that enables organizations to empower individuals at scale. And by that, what I mean is that we really effectively manage content workflows to allow organizations to spread their message and their content more easily. To give you an example, for the NBA or MLB, what Greenfly does is we have it's an app-based solution where 300 plus players from the NBA or 800 players from Major League Baseball will download the Greenfly app. And what the NBA or MLB will do is they will use the Greenfly platform to distribute photos after a game, or videos, or graphics, or marketing messages, such that when a player, Kobe White, gets off the floor after a Bulls game, on his phone he has every photo from that game. So if he wants to share it to Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, he's very easily able to do so. And then from a scaling perspective, it means that, the NBA or the marketing team or the photographer is not sending text message or sending Dropbox links or sending emails of content, but there's a very easy way for the first guy and the 15th guy on the bench all to get their content at the same time. And for it to be a process where you don't add more people, but you use technology to kind of amplify how you send content out.
So Greenfly also has worked with political campaigns, most recently the Biden campaign. What can you tell us about their strategies and the role Greenfly played in making that team so successful?
For the Biden campaign and for the DNCC, we effectively did the same thing on a different scale. So when you look at, and I'll start with the DNCC, when you look at the Democratic convention from this past year, obviously you didn't have everybody in person. And so where people might be taking pictures and they might be posting things, that wasn't possible. So what Greenfly allowed the DNCC to do was to create a platform where every delegate, every celebrity influencer, every politician, Democratic politician who wanted access to content would be able to get access to that content at the same time. And it allowed us to put, 3,000 people from a Democratic convention all on the platform at the same time. The cool part about it was that from a content perspective, it actually helped. So as opposed to having someone in the nosebleed seat who's taking a picture, when former President Obama is speaking, you can actually send everybody a video of close-up with text underneath of it as soon as it happens. And so you start to get this effect where everybody is looking at the best view of the best content and able to share it in real time. And so you actually have a lot more people sharing a lot more content. So the social footprint that you're actually able to get by organizing that becomes a lot broader. Also, just from an organization standpoint, I think that a lot of orgs look to their social handles and accounts as a way to get out their message. But the truth is that when you look at the total reach of all the people who are connected to you, so however many people are following the DNCC Twitter handle, if you take every delegate, every Democratic, politician, every celebrity influencer, and you look at the collective reach out of all of them, they very much dwarf the reach of just the DNCC Twitter handle. So if you give content to all those people, you actually have a much easier and a much better way of distributing that content and getting that message out to more widely, because each of those individual people will reach individual on a personal level, people that would never be reached by that main account. So it's a way to actually take that advocacy and the marketing of your brand and actually extend it out immensely in a real-time way to a lot of people.
This kind of business just didn't exist a decade ago, and who knows what the next decade will bring. So how does the company consider itself in terms of longevity and what becomes the next phase of Greenfly? How do you talk and think about how it could morph and evolve into the next iteration of services?
I'd say there are a lot of people with a lot of content. And the question that people most often ask, I think, is how do we create more content? And I don't think it's necessarily just about creating more content. It's about creating it more efficiently. So I think there are two sides. One is a creative question of what more content we can create. And the other really becomes a data question of how can we be more efficient in the content we distribute. So from the efficiency standpoint, it's how do we automate this? So one of the things that we work with is, if you're thinking about, um, take the Morehead Foundation. If you were to take everybody, the senior dinner, from senior dinner, you have a lot of photos from that. How do you get all of those photos into a system to share? You could share a Dropbox link with people, or you could post them in email, or you could post them aside and people could download them. If you were going to use Greenfly to do it, how could we make it more efficient? Well, we could connect to Dropbox and we could sync it a folder such that all that content flows automatically. In the case of the NBA, we sync to Getty Images. So the 20,000 NBA images that are taken on a nightly basis, we have a way to automatically route them. So each individual player gets all his specific images just to him. So using metadata and using technology in there to make that system and that process more efficient. If we're showing someone 100 images, what are the first 20 images we should show? If you're doing, take the instance of the NBA, if the first 20 images are all practice and warm up shots, that's probably not what people want to see. They want shots from the game, they want game winning shots. So, out of those 100 images, how do we find the best images to give to people? And then, kind of like what we talked about with the Biden campaign, how do we scale to larger and larger groups of advocates? So originally we started off in sports. It's great to have 900 players from the NBA, 900 players from Major League Baseball on the platform, or 300 plus players from the NBA. How do we do 3,000 people from the Biden campaign? How do we expand to even larger and larger groups? And I think as you start to expand to larger and larger groups, the technology questions that you start to get to start to become different, and you have to solve new and very different problems. And so as we scale out the communities that we work with, the types of people that we work with, what politics needs may be different from what a retailer needs. What an entertainment company does may be different from what a financial service company needs. So, how do you create a platform that satisfies the needs of those many groups and the different things that they do without making it a complicated experience for the end user or the people using the platform?
That's interesting. And how do you think about hedging against competition, other companies replicating the technology, or consolidation and the risk of getting bought out, for instance, as has happened with so many tech companies?
You have to play your game. I'd say that we know there will be competition in different sectors. We have different competitive companies that may do similar things to what we do. But to the point of the technology, I think technology is your IP and your competitive advantage. As you solve these problems at scale, for anyone else who wants to do it, they're going to have to come and there's a lot of work to be done. I said that while the platform works, we're constantly running into new issues and new things and solving them. And as we solve those issues, at the end of the day, the choice is on the consumer or the client. And if you offer the best product, other people may offer other products as well. But if you kind of focus on making sure that you offer the best product, the best platform, and the best experience for your clients, I think over time you'll win out. Um, the way I kind of think about it as well is just more broadly from a technology standpoint. Again, I may be dating myself somewhat, but when I think about the streaming, the music wars, you used to have where you had a Napster or a LimeWire where people would illegally download content, and people said, people won't pay for it. I don't know why people would do it. And you had iTunes that said, hey, if I build a better way for people to consume content, I think that I can get people to pay for it. You have a Spotify doing the same thing, and what you found is that when people built a better product, it was a better experience, people said, okay, I will pay for that. No one's talking about who's illegally downloading or illegally streaming music. Most people get a Spotify account, an iTunes account, and that's how they receive their content. I think you see the same thing in the so-called streaming wars, where you can go to Reddit and you can illegally download content. Before I was at Greenfly, I was at Major League Baseball. People always had the ability to do it, but one of our core products was At Bat, which was a baseball streaming service. And as we created a great way for people to consume that content, what you found is that there may be people who decide to download it illegally, but the vast majority of people just want an easy experience. They want to be able to do it effectively. And if you provide a great product for doing that, I think over the long term, you'll win out.
So, this is a selfish question, but what would you say any organization of any size can do to effectively implement the sort of tactics you've spoken about today, even without Greenfly?
You want to leverage moments that people are already creating. So it's much easier to ask someone to share something that is an existing behavior than to create a whole new behavior. So taking the example of the Dodgers, if the Dodgers asked fans after a home run was hit, a grand slam was hit to win a regular season game, Send us your photos of where you were when, the Dodge, when this Grand Slam was hit. You're not going to get 3,500 pieces of content. But if you ask fans, that when that final out is happening, and you're about to win the game, everyone has their phones out. So people are going to have that content already. They're already creating it. And so when they asked fans to send in that moment, they were more so leveraging the existing behavior of fans than trying to create a new one. Every one of those fans that sent it wasn't sending in that content because they knew the Dodgers were going to ask for it. They were taking that content because it's something that they wanted. And the Dodgers were able to tap into an existing behavior. So, that's where you find the biggest benefit, the biggest push on this content. And then we do the same thing. What we know for sports, why does it work for sports? What I know, from my time at baseball and now is that the content that for any one of these athletes that's going to be the biggest content is going to be game footage. If you're a basketball player and you have, 10 million followers on Instagram, most of them are following you because you're a basketball player. You might be an amateur chef, you might like fishing, you might like a lot of things, but what most people are following you for is because you're a basketball player, and because that's the content they want to see. So when we go and we talk to these organizations about what they're doing, we try to provide the content that is working. And so once that's working, it kind of lines up everything where people want to get onto the platform because they know they're going to get content they want. They know that content is going to be things that their followers want, and everything kind of works together. So I'd say the first step for a lot of organizations is that you produce a lot of content, you look at a lot of content, you want to distribute content, but what content is really working for you, and really taking, an analytical approach to lining up the content. How much content did we send out? How many likes did we get? How many comments did we get? Actually, I'd say that even from a social standpoint, looking more at the number of comments you get. So where are we generating conversation? Because if we're generating conversation, we're providing a real benefit. What are people sharing the most from us? Not just what gets the most likes, but what do people share the most? Because if they're sharing that content, that's probably content that we could provide to people. And then once you start looking at it in that way, you start narrowing down the content you have. You start focusing on what really is mattering and what's making the biggest difference. And then once you have that all kind of lined up, it's easy to go out to people and like, hey, do you want this content? Is this something that's helpful? And if you've done the work behind beforehand to look at what works best for you, you'll be in a much better position to provide people content that they use. So you may not provide a gallery with 50 pieces of content, but the 3 pieces of content you might give to someone, you have a much higher likelihood of people using that content, sharing that content. And if they share it, it means that as you provide them more content, they're more willing and they're more likely to come back and to really create that relationship where they're looking to you to provide content, or they're looking to create content for you because it's things that they want to do or that makes sense.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Today we've been hearing from Andrew Patterson, class of 06, and a Morehead-Cain mentor. The mentoring program is designed to leverage the power of the Morehead-Cain network by cultivating connections between scholars and alumni and providing structure and support to these relationships so they can develop based on shared values and interests. All rising juniors and seniors are eligible to participate. So you've mentioned a few times your work at MLB, where you worked for quite a few years. When did you know it was time to make the switch to Greenfly?
I didn't. I didn't know it was time to make a switch. I just decided to take a risk and a chance. I think MLB professionally for me was the greatest and the coolest experience, obviously barring being at Greenfly right now. But to work for a league, not only in doing media, but to be a rights holder, it was for me, again, didn't go to business school, but that was business school for me, to be able to work on it and to learn. I think every year I was at baseball was a new challenge, a new learning opportunity. I think as it progressed towards the end of my time at MLB, it became more comfortable. I wasn't uncomfortable. I knew what kind of I wanted to do. I knew what our long-term plan was, the short-term plan, the ways to look at it. And I just wanted to, a new challenge and a different challenge. And when I moved to Greenfly, it's one thing to work at Major League Baseball, but when you work with PSG as a client, or you work with the NBA as a client, you'll see a lot of the same things, but in different ways. When we work with Getty, we're not only working with MLB, but a whole host of folks, and that excitement. I think that's probably what it was. It was the excitement of the new opportunity, of the new challenges, and quite frankly, being a little scared about making the jump. Is this right? Does this make sense? Can I do it? And to ask those questions, and then at the end of the day to look at a platform and a technology I believed and be like, well, I don't know what it's going to end up like, but it's exciting, and that challenge was exciting. And as I built and I learned more, and I talked to our CEO and our co-founders, I got more and more excited not only about the business, but how I might be able to leverage all that I learned at MLB in a new setting, and do something new and different. And at that time, I kind of pulled the cord and jumped. And I didn't know how it would end up, but I am, again, looking back, hindsight 2020, it was exactly the right time, is exactly the right decision. At the time I did it, I don't know if I was as 100% sure. I felt good about it, but like, baseball was fantastic. I didn't know if it would necessarily equal it, but I was willing to take the risk and the chance, and I think it worked out.
So, what I'm hearing is that it sounds like your mind was nudging you in that direction because it seemed like you were ready for the next mountain to climb, even if your emotions hadn't quite caught up with you. So, it made it a smart move, irrespective of the fact that things were still very much going well at MLB.
Yep. I mean, that's 100%. I think, interestingly enough, one of the best advices I ever heard on career was probably Chuck. He said that there were three things you look for in a job or in your working career: a place you like living, people you like and respect working for, and a job you like doing. And at baseball, I had all three. I love the people that I work with. I worked with some of the smartest people in the sports industry, some of the smartest people in the media industry, and uh, a lot of my job was, being able to ask questions of really smart people, to have them challenge what you think is correct, to kind of go back to the drawing board and refactor it, to get that consensus and build it up. And that was a learning experience. So I love the people that I work with. I love the job that I was doing. I wasn't necessarily the biggest baseball fan before I started, but working at baseball, I loved all those things about it. And those things were things that I would miss. You're not going to get the same people at any new job. You'll find new people, but the relationship that I built over 8.5 years with the folks at baseball was something that meant a lot to me. The job and being able to look over 8 years and see how things were grown were really impressive. You're proud of the work that you do, and you take some ownership. As we kind of talked about before, like, when you see someone using your content or talking about your product or talking about your platforms, it's extremely gratifying to know that the work that you do, like, makes a difference, or people care about it, or people like it. And I knew what that was at baseball, and it felt good. um, those were the hardest things to kind of give up, and I didn't know what I'd get on the other side. And now it's not the same people necessarily, but they're different people with different challenges and different things to teach me. And I found that to be, extremely helpful, and a new way to grow as well.
And you are, of course, a Morehead-Cain mentor, and you've just shared some great mentoring advice you've received from Chuck in the past. Is there any advice you often also pass down to your mentees in terms of how to navigate these big career switches and in charting out your own path?
I think the biggest thing is asking questions. So I think that, in addition to mentor, one of the most fun parts of my job is having interns during the summer, just because they're completely new to the business. And it's a chance to help someone understand what their career or their future will be. And I would say that, by and large, like, the folks that I work with on an interning basis, I don't expect them to be in the career or the role that I have. But if you can show people all of the opportunities that might exist out there, it'll give them a chance to find what they like and what makes them happy. I'd say where I've been most fortunate in my job is that I love what I do. It makes the days easy. It makes the projects fun. When you're sitting down there and you're racking your brain about it, or you're driving in the car and there's a thought that kind of pops in your head, it's fun for me. Like, it's what I want to spend my days doing. But it's also very personal. In my career arc, you have to be willing to try new things, and just be different. When I first started, I worked in finance, and then I worked at a ad network. Then I worked at an advertising agency, and I did a startup between there. And then I worked at Major League Baseball doing product and social media. Now I do technology and business development. And those jobs, while different from each other, there are threads that I've learned from each of them. From every job, I think there are two things that you can take away: the things that you like and the things that you don't. And it's important on both sides. Like, how big of a group do you want to work with? What do you want your day to be? And if you find the things that you like, pursue them. And if you find the things that you don't like as you look for new opportunities, don't necessarily avoid them, but understand what makes you most efficient as a person, what makes you happiest to work. Because when you bring that passion to the work that you do, I find that it really helps drive you forward, where kind of everything's pushing in the same direction.
Andrew, great talking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Catalyze. I'm Sarah O'Carroll, and that was Andrew Patterson, class of 06. You can let us know what you thought of the episode by finding us on Twitter or Instagram at Morehead-Cain, or by emailing us at communications@moreheadcain.org.